So, what's on people's minds now is what will happen going forward with the election process for President of the United States between President Trump and VP Harris. As a result of this, we have to go ahead and look at what has just happened with the Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration is trying to process benefits based off of Social Security numbers, based off of their internal system. A national group that works with all of the different federal agencies, including the SSA, including the Treasury, including HHS, has lost all of the Social Security numbers to the dark web in April. As a result, there is enough time for hackers, for fraudsters, to go ahead and manipulate this data to change the results of a presidential election. How could this happen? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The main thing would be, of course, challenges to voter eligibility. There would be disputes over the identities of those individuals. So, if these social security numbers were compromised, which they all are, there would be increased challenges to voters' identities at polling stations, leading to delays and disputes over who is who, which would slow down these different voter facilities because you would need additional staff to make sure everybody was who they actually are. This means that potentially people can go ahead and do nefarious things with the social security number and other information, like changing basic information online on websites, like changing different systems that exist. Now, as you know, the SSA recently changed the requirement of how you can log into your mysocialsecurity.gov website. They did this likely because they knew that every single social security number had been stolen and placed on the dark web. That's why they had been aggressively emailing everybody to change their login system to be able to access their own mysocialsecurity.gov information. As a result of this, we know that the government did not tell us in a timely fashion that they had lost all of our social security numbers and that they had been working in the background to try and create systems that would have new security principles in place to make sure that this wouldn't happen again. All right, so let's talk about basically the next thing, which is there will be that increased need for voter verification. They will have to implement more strict verification processes. This is something that on the Democrat side, they are not willing to do. They don't want identification of people where you have to bring an ID. Obviously, when you go to vote in something like an election in the United States, you should be required to have multiple forms of ID to prove who you actually are. Losing everybody's social security system to the dark web can create a problem where we don't know if the person is who they actually claim to be. There's a mail-in ballot fraud potential problem. There's illegitimate ballot requests. Stolen social security numbers could be used to request mail-in ballots fraudulently. This could result in ballots being sent to people who don't actually exist or somebody else who's using it to submit additional votes for a person that they want. Then there's voter registration fraud. So you could, in theory, manipulate the voter rolls. Fraudsters could use the social security numbers that were stolen to change voter registration records by registering things under false identities or altering the current existing identities to be something false that can be used for voting purposes. This could lead to confusion, of course, and lots of problems when it comes to voting day. This will ultimately result in the public trust being eroded when it comes to the election process. Now, we were all told during the prior election process that that election system was the most secure system that they've ever had up to this date. There were lawsuits. There were massive searches. There were quite a few things found that were irregularities with that system. However, ultimately, the lawsuits were found to be mostly against the Republicans. However, in other nations that use the exact same system for voting, there's now a massive lawsuit going on where they did find fraud. So that will be developing during this presidential election as well, which is not going to help, of course, our belief in the voting system, nor is it going to help the future of that company being able to provide a trustworthy platform for people to vote with. So the impact on the election infrastructure will be quite massive. It will overburden the system by requiring a lot of new systems to be put in place. And also, it will go ahead and overburden the system because you'll need a lot of people to cross check who is actually voting, who showed up on voting day. Now, that's the voting day stuff. There's stuff before that that could be done by manipulating this private information. Okay. Targeted voter suppression is absolutely on the table when it comes to manipulating the voter rolls. People who are unhappy with one particular group could use stolen social security numbers to selectively remove or alter voter registrations in specific demographics or regions, leading to targeted voter suppression. This could change or disproportionately affect certain groups and make them less likely to get who they wanted to vote for. There will also likely be disinformation campaigns popping up as a result of fraudsters using the compromised social security number data to launch all these campaigns with targeted messages to voters to confuse them about what their registration status is, where the polling locations are, what's actually required on the day you show up, or even what the voting process is. Now, this could also include, and very likely will, exploitation by foreign interests, foreign actors, foreign countries, foreign hackers. This can happen where they can exploit the available social security numbers to interfere in the election process, either by manipulating the voter data or by creating chaos and undermining confidence in the electoral system where some people won't even show up. All these things are major problems to go ahead and get people to have a free and fair and direct vote. The one thing I'm worried about the most, because people are aware the systems aren't perfect, and people are aware the systems really aren't where they need to be. Having a system where a third party group not related to the government in any way decides whether or not a vote was for one person or the other inside that company, that's not democracy. And ironically, the people screaming democracy, 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 we're all for it. Kind of like the Harris situation where they never got to vote for her. But again, not saying anything about VP Harris. She's a good contender to throw up against Trump. She's younger. She should have a lot of pep in her step. She should be able to be competitive. She is not the norm of what we usually have as presidential candidate. So it's kind of a Hail Mary here. We don't know how this ball is going to be thrown. We don't know what's going to happen with it. With that said, I think fake campaign donations as a result of using stolen identities to open up basically, loans and then funnel that money from the loans into campaigns that would violate the election laws. I think there's going to be a lot of that. I think there's going to be people who are making donations that have no idea that they're even making donations. And then by the time they get the money back, right, the election will already be over. I think that this will create a lot of legal burdens, administrative burdens. I think a lot of lawyers will get stuck in election law or election, uh, you know, I would say, what would you call it? We'd call it fraudulent election practices. I think a lot of attorneys will get sucked into that to have to be used to go ahead and figure out who, what, when, and where should be allowed in the future. I think there will be that administrative overload that's occurring where basically there's just way too many administrative restrictions when it comes to being able to just be who you are because we have a system that won't be able to trust anybody. So this will all evolve into an advanced voter authentication system where you will have to have something way beyond just a social security number to be able to vote in the future. You're going to have a string code that's likely tied to a DNA strand. And the idea is that if you have a string code that's tied to your DNA where it's thousands of numbers, 50,000 codes, 50,000 numbers, whatever, it'll be very difficult to go ahead and steal specific information if it's kept properly. But remember, the whole reason we're here is because the information was not kept properly. So there will be more multi-factor authentication stuff where you have to, say, okay, here's my card, here's my this, here's my license, and then they'll make you click a button on your phone that's specifically linked to you. Okay. Now, this is an interesting situation because the early voting or absentee voting could be the most heavily impacted by this, by getting significant amounts of votes in, basically during the earlier session, the earlier period. This is where you could see potentially the most amount of fraudulent conduct. Okay. Now, there could also be a situation where the systems used to go through the election process, our election machines, could also have a higher rejection rate. And as you know, the systems we use, unfortunately, have a third party group that's part of the company who gets to decide, for the most part, who that vote was actually supposed to go to during the quick authentication process of translating who would receive that vote. A lot of people think that there's always Republicans and Democrats sitting there going through those votes that are problematic. There isn't. That comes afterwards once somebody says, hey, we believe this could have potentially gone this way or that way. The systems that we're currently using are unfortunately handled by a third party group to decide who we're actually voting for. So a lot of potential for fraudulent issues there. Then there is basically data corruption. If you can get access to different systems using social security numbers, using, basically your birthday, etc., then what that means is that you can go into the system as a coder and potentially start clicking away to find weaknesses in the electronic CMS, client management system, until you can go ahead and start removing, altering, or just basically corrupting files. Okay. Now, as a result of all of this, people, they're not going to have a full belief in their election cycle. And that's not a good thing. But at the same time, you should never have any faith or belief in the government to actually fix things for you. As you know, you pay a lot of taxes. As you know, you don't receive that much benefit. And as you know, things just keep getting more and more expensive and are out of control. It is important to remember with this situation that the government is not supposed to be an overall arching existence that's supposed to take care of you. You don't live in that. You live in a democracy / republic that is capitalism based. The whole idea of that is that you compete to earn money based off of your value of what you're able to accomplish. And that value is measured against what society thinks you're actually worth. But that's why we have some socialism, because people who are elderly shouldn't have to be working, because people who are disabled shouldn't have to be working. And as a result of that, right, we have this system in place so that capitalism will pay for those who are unable to work or shouldn't have to work at their current age. So we have a balanced socialist, capitalist, democracy republic, right? But at the end of the day, you got to understand that we're going to be seeing a lot of problems with this upcoming election, specifically as a result of the release of every social security number, every name, every alternative name, etc., that is available. So, with that said, hang on to your hats. It's going to be a very, very interesting election season coming forward. There's already been an assassination attempt. There's already been a candidate put in without a single vote being passed by any of the people. This is going to be a very, very unique election cycle, and hopefully you'll get the candidate that you want. All right. Please remember to like and subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful day. I have to go back to work now and do calls and briefs and hearings for the upcoming adjudications. You have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we'll catch up shortly from there. Thank you so much, Attorney Walter Hnot, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.